I mean, honestly, if you start doing these 3 things right now in Procreate, it will be an absolute game changer. It will allow you to create some amazing art and take your work to the next level. I am Rocket and I love nothing more than teaching you digital art tips, specifically in Procreate. Let's jump into today's video where I'm going to go over 4 tips you need to start doing immediately in Procreate, which is going to help take your artwork to the next level. And what makes me so special and be able to tell you these things, because I started to do them and it took my artwork to the next level as well. So let's jump straight into the first one, which is working in zones in your artwork. All right, so what do I mean by zones? Let's have a look at this piece on the screen here. If I drop down my layers, I have main categories for each of the groups. Now, if you want to think about a zone as a group, that's fine as well. But think about the artwork as zones, and we're going to create groups around those. So if we have a look in the layers, I have the top of the head in its own layer. I have the side of the head in its own layer as well. I have the face in its own layer, and I have this one here, Xenomorph, in its own layer. Now this was a few of those originally before I combined them down into this much bigger zone, but I did find myself really needing to focus on the top of the head, the side of the head, and the face a lot in those zones. Now, why are zones important? Let's have a look. So if we drop down the top of the head here, I had a lot of problems with this when I was creating this piece. I just couldn't get it right. So I created a zone for this part here, and if we solo it, we can see that it is a really unique shape. It is definitely not front on. It's on this little bit of an angle, and it's got a lot of light movement around it. So I've got a base layer down here, a really dark, pretty much black, I'll be honest with you, it is black. And then above it, I have a clipping mask. So having this in its own zone, I can do whatever I like in here. It's not affecting the rest of the piece. And I can use a clipping mask like this and create, a very unique design in the end, and then come back in, add some textures over the top afterwards, and it creates something which, when we add it back in to the overall design, we can see what an impact it has. And it did allow me to get across that part of designing this or drawing this where I really did feel stuck. Next up, creating your own folder of most used brushes in the brush library. Let's have a look at what I mean. We're going to drop down our brush library here, and I have so many different brush folders here with a lot of brushes that I've made or I've purchased or that came with Procreate. But what I mean by this specific point here is we want to create our own folder, Rocket's brushes. We can see it here. And this is honestly my most used brushes. These 3 here, soft brush airbrush, the soft pastel, and the 6B pencil, I pretty much used exclusively to create this piece here, but I use them more than any other brush inside Procreate. They are not purchased. I did not make them. They came with Procreate, and I love them so much. Why do we want to create folders like this? 1, it can be our most overall used brushes. 2, if you have different styles of art you like to create, maybe you want to have different folders available for you. I was thinking about creating a realism one recently, maybe a neo-traditional one, American traditional, whatever it is. You can create these folders, and it's going to allow you to have really quick access to them, and then maybe you could even set them as a quick menu here, and then maybe have that folder set to one of these boxes, and when you press on it, you can select a brush nice and quick. Next up, using Gaussian blur to add depth into your artwork. Now, another good reason to use this piece of art as an example, I use this on each zone in here, and as I went further back into the piece, I added more Gaussian blur on, which allowed the viewer, when they're looking at it, to go, okay, yep, the face is definitely in the foreground, and these mountains at the back are definitely in the background. So what do we do about that? We find the layer that we want to add Gaussian blur to, maybe layer 17 here in the chest, and we can head up the top left, go to our adjustments tab, and we're going to select Gaussian blur. Now we're going to get a little menu at the top here. At the moment it's set to 0%. I'm going to start from my left or your right, and I'm going to drag my pencil across the screen, and we're going to see it add Gaussian blur. Now you see, as soon as you go too far, it really starts to take effect. What I did with this piece is the head had no Gaussian blur on it at all. The body had about 5% from memory, maybe about 4%. And then as I went back, I added more and more on. So we might do 4% for the torso, we might do 6 or 7% for the leg here, and then the actual mountains in the background had about 10 or 12%. Use Gaussian blur to add depth, and I promise you, when you get good at this, it's really going to take your art to the next level by creating some amazing depth in it. And last up, enhancing depth with textures and details. Now, I'm going to go into this further in a future video, but I really wanted to quickly touch on this because it can really take a piece like this to the next level. Adding textures can emphasize depth. And if we have a look in this piece here, we can think about texture as an overall sort of a base layer. And if we zoom in, this whole xenomorph here is based off a texture underlay. If I open up my layers and I have a look at all of these layers that are created here, if I solo any of them, they're all going to be created from that pastel brush. And the pastel brush is really a texture brush. That's what it does. It is fantastic at this. And if I was to create this whole piece with a soft airbrush, I guarantee you it would not look as realistic as it does. Adding texture really tricks the eye into thinking that something is really there when clearly it's not. Adding to this, some of the best textures we can use are right at the end of a piece as well. We can come in over the top and add things like the drool, which is coming down out of the teeth here. If I remove that, it just doesn't look the same. I realize it is a design choice and I didn't have to have it in there, but let's remove it and have a look. And it looks cool, it looks mean, but you add that little bit of texture in that super sharp spittle coming down out of the mouth, and that one little bit of texture really lifts this piece to the next level. So make sure we're using texture not only as a base of our artwork, but also adding highlights on at the end or those extra little bits. Make sure we create new layers to do this at the end. Maybe they're in the zones like I talked about before. That way, if we make a mistake, we can easily get rid of it. It's not affecting everything else we've done, and it always gives us another chance to give it a go if we don't get it right, or delete it if we just don't like it. And that's going to do it for these more advanced tips in Procreate. We're really thinking about the ways we're going to use Procreate and the types of art we're going to create, but all of these can really help you step up in this fantastic app and make your artwork stand out from the rest. Get out there and give these ones a go. Let me know in the comments below if you like them, if you use them, or if you want to use them in the future. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video because it helps me grow and bring you these videos each and every week, which I love to do. So until the next video, get out there and let's get creative.